Scott Monahan, who lives about an hour away from me, is also a Google certified teacher, and he's going to be kind of jumping in and out, asking questions that he sees in the chat. And Sandra is going to do the same thing as well. She lives in Toronto, and she's a Google certified teacher, and she was at the Google Teacher Academy with me in July, end of July. So they're going to be helping out. So today, I want to share with you my talk about helping students collaborate with Google Apps. Feel free to tweet, as we're talking and going through the presentation, and maybe we can get more people to jump on and check out what we're talking about. Awesome. So Scott and Sandra, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I'm just going to switch off my phone onto the computer there.
Sure. Awesome. So,
sorry, I think Mom's going to be home in a minute. Okay.
No worries. So I wanted to talk about Google Apps and how they've been supporting my young students, my grade 2s, with collaboration and creativity. And for those who don't know me, my name is Roland Chidiak, and I'm in Waterloo, Ontario in Canada, and I'm a Google certified teacher, and I'm currently teaching grade 2. Google Apps for me have been absolutely transformational. They've changed the way that I teach my students, and they've actually changed the way that my students respond to me and the way that they treat each other and the way that they treat their work. I've seen a lot more creativity out of my students. The collaboration's incredible, the critical thinking. So my students at this point want to spend time taking the curriculum that I'm kind of teaching them and going through with them, and they want to start creating things and show me their understanding that way, and GAF has been huge in making that happen. As I said earlier, that I want to talk about building capacity using GAF around creativity and collaboration. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about collaboration and what I've seen my students do with the help of Google Apps for Education. So on the right hand,
Roland,
yes.
There's a question about whether Google Apps requires special permission for students under age 13.
Yes, my understanding is because our school board is now gone GAF, gone Google, it's my understanding that once the school board signed on to do this, that they've agreed to take responsibility for students under 13 and their accounts. So I don't know like the technical legal requirements. I just know that we've taken a responsibility for making sure that our students who are under 13 are following the rules and not doing anything that's outside of the realm of what's to happen. Now I don't know if Scott can jump on, but I know Scott is in a position with his school board where he could speak to that, I think. But that's my understanding. So they're allowed to have a GAF account because we've taken responsibility for them.
Yes, and in our school board, we go down as low as the primary grades as well. So there shouldn't be a problem as long as your school board has signed on.
Right, that's my understanding. So on this screen here, on the right-hand side, I took this screen capture right from the Google for Education site. And right away when I went to the site, I saw that they've got the word collaboration there twice. So that told me right away that, okay, this is great. Obviously, there's a device here, and there are apps here that's going to allow for this to happen seamlessly. And in my experience, it has. The picture on the left are my students working on a task, and trust me, I didn't tell them that they had to go sit on the carpet and do what they're doing. They simply just started doing it. They wanted to work together. So for this activity, you'll see at the top middle, there's a young boy in black shirt. He's working on his own, but everybody else has somebody sitting beside them. Like I said, this was not me. I I didn't direct them to do this. They just kind of got together with the person that they normally sit beside, and they started working on this task. I've noticed that the kids, that not only do they want to work together, but they want to make suggestions on how their friends can improve, and they also ask their friends to provide them with suggestions. Now, I didn't see a lot of that happening with paper and pencil. Paper and pencil was more, on their own. There would be a little bit of collaboration, but it wouldn't look like this. And I'm noticing that GAF has also provided my students with a voice. So the students who are having a hard time with the paper and pencil, they didn't have to worry anymore about their writing or keeping up with everybody else. They would just use the app to help them with whatever activity we were doing, which has been great. GAF also allows the students to share their work freely. So when I assign a task, they automatically share it with me, they share it with others, and then they start working on it. And the beautiful thing about this is that they're not only collaborating at school and over the technology in the building, but they're doing it at home. They're doing it on their time without me directing them. So we've seen this evolution where they were taught how to use the devices. In this case, we've got Chromebooks in my class, so they were using Chromebooks. And even when they're not using the Chromebooks, when we're in the computer lab, they're still doing these things. They're sharing their work. They're asking their friends for suggestions. They're providing their friends with suggestions on how to make their work better based on our success criteria that we talk about in our classroom. And they're going down a road that I think is going to benefit them in the long run. It seems to be benefiting them already in the things that they're producing and the way that they're able to talk to me about the work that they're producing.
So how long have you been doing this with your students?
This started at the beginning of last school year. So I've been doing this now for almost 2 years. The beginning is a little bit rough because they don't have the skills to use the device in an effective way and in a seamless way. So the first little bit is difficult in that, you're preparing them, you're teaching them. I call it digital boot camp, where they're learning all their logins and passwords and kind of how to navigate their Google Drive and the different apps. But once that's under control, once they're comfortable with that, it is just amazing. And as I go on, hopefully you'll see some of the things that they've done based on that. Thanks for asking that question, Sandra.
Yeah, I found that because I teach a junior grade, they jump right into it, and it's just really great to see that even in the primary grades that they're doing this as well.
Yeah, for sure. So when they come to me, they're just entering grade 2, so they're still grade 1s. And like I said, it takes a little bit of time, but if you give them the time to practice and you provide them with that positive feedback, they naturally want to do this. I've not had one student come up to me and say, I don't want to learn how to use a Chromebook. I don't want to learn how to use my GAF account. I've not experienced that yet, and I've been doing it with 2 classes now, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, sometimes the fear is in the teachers wanting to release the responsibilities for their students.
That's right, yeah. The fear is usually on our side, not on theirs. Here I have 3 examples of work around collaboration using Google Apps for Education. So the first one on the far left, I call that a whole class collaboration. And this was an assignment where the students were working in a Google document, and they were all working in there together. They were creating 3D geometry riddles. And the beautiful thing about this was some were working on their own. When I say on their own, I mean that they had their own Chromebook. Other kids wanted to sit with a partner and not have their own Chromebook, which was fine. And what they were doing was they were using a chart in the room to look at the characteristics of 3D shapes and then start writing riddles and inputting those riddles in this shared Google document. I had the Google document projected on the whiteboard so that I could kind of see what was going on from like an overall picture. And it was just amazing to watch the kids actually doing their work, working with each other to help each other, and going around the room as they're working on the devices. So it was a lot of fun to watch, and I just had to step back and take notes and pictures to kind of document what was going on. In the middle, I've got what I call small group collaboration. So students they've got their computers and they're working inside of a Google app for education. I'm not particularly sure which app they were working on with respect to the middle picture, but they each had their Chromebook, and they were choosing to share their work with the people around them and also sit beside each other to kind of look at each other's screens and talk about what they were doing. And in the picture on the far right is what I call the no-tech collaboration, and this has been a beautiful thing. So the collaboration and the culture that's been built using GAF with the devices in the classroom has spilled over into some of the paper and pencil work that they're now doing that I didn't see before. So in this picture here, the students are using cue cards, and they're working on an activity that was choose your own adventure stories that they were creating, and they were going to be creating them using Google Slides. But before they worked with the actual slides and GAF, they were writing everything out on the cue cards and kind of setting up their story. But they were acting, they were collaborating in the same way that they would with the devices. And when I saw that, it was completely fascinating to me the way that the culture had changed from the way that they used with the computers, with the devices, and then outside of devices. They were totally applying those skills. Any questions?
Roland, you've been talking about how as you kind of introduced GAF into your classroom, that students started collaborating more and more effectively. There's a question here that asks about whether you feel this opened door for other teachable character ed moments.
I would say yes. I would say overall that the way that this collaboration was growing and this culture of collaboration was growing, it was leading into what I'm going to talk about next, which is the creativity. But it was all about taking risks and feeling comfortable taking the risks. So I was seeing the students doing a lot of things that were kind of out of the ordinary. You know, in terms of, I'll give you a quick example, like the way that they were treating each other had changed. It had become more responsible. They were more accountable, because with the technology comes the accountability and the responsibility. And then mix that in with the learning, and everything starts to shift. And that's why I called it a transformation, because they were changing in all different realms of the way that they interact in the classroom and the way they treat each other. I'm going to move on now to creativity and just talk about that a little bit to give you an idea of how GAF has really allowed my students to be much more creative with the way that they operate in the room, and basically the way that the students from last year have moved on with their lives based on what they tell me when I talk to them outside of class. The class I have this year they're still kind of getting through, they're working on this. The creativity hasn't come the same as it did last year, but it's definitely there much more than it was at the beginning of the year. So on the screen, I have some examples of some of the things that the students had created using GAF that they told me they couldn't have created or wouldn't have thought about creating before. On the left-hand side, I have a picture of something called the leprechaun catcher. And this was one of the first moments where a student took a huge risk and shared her work with the class by standing in front of everybody and saying, listen, this has been on my mind. I just didn't know how to make it happen, but using Google Drawings, I could kind of it helped me facilitate what it is that I wanted to share with you. And she talked about this creation of something she could build to capture a leprechaun. We all thought it was hilarious, but nobody was laughing at her. Nobody talked about her idea being ridiculous. Nobody mocked her for standing in front of them and expressing this. I think what it did was it started to empower other students to be like, hey, she took this idea in her mind and she said she didn't know how to kind of put it together using paper and pencil, and Google Drawing kind of made her feel comfortable enough to get it out, and she did. And then that started other things, like the pictures on the right, where students started creating superheroes on their own time, which then spiraled into this really huge project that they put on themselves. It had nothing to do with me. It was happening on their time, and a couple of boys started creating superheroes, and then other people were interested in what they were doing because they were sharing their work and they were asking for suggestions. And I just want to show you on the right-hand side, the bottom picture is a superhero called Party Girl, and when there's a party going down, you can call Candy, and her power is to save parties that are going bad. So it was really cool that my students told me that this was all coming out of their time using GAF and feeling comfortable to express themselves in ways that they felt they couldn't do before.
And so, Roland, I remember we were chatting about this, and like in many ways, you can use Google Draw or Google Slides, like almost like KidPix. I don't know. You remember that, Scott? KidPix a long time ago. And so there was a question about whether this can be introduced to kindergartners, and this is like the perfect accessible point for kindergartners to join in, where they can draw, and there was another question about, you know, where to start. This is a great way to start, where you just draw pictures and students annotate what it is, what's the picture about, and it's simple because the students are collaborating, they're publishing, and they're seeing each other's work, and exactly what you said, they just get excited about it.
Oh, totally. And if I could throw in a little tidbit about where to start, or whether you could do this with kindergartens, my response would be that I've had the kindergarten teachers at my school connect with me and ask me those same questions. How do I do this with these little guys? And my first response was, when you sit down to do your work with them to create your anchor charts and your criteria and your learning goals at the kindergarten level, do you have your projector on, projecting your Google Drive, and using the tools in your Drive to show your kids what you're doing? And they said no. And I said, well, I would start there. I would start by modeling it for them. Show them what it looks like now, so when they get to grade 1, they know what a Google Drive is. They know what it looks like. They know how to get to the apps. You know, some of them will be much more skilled than the others, and that's fine. But they have to start somewhere. And a kindergarten teacher at my school started using slides to document their learning in their units. And now she's got 3 or 4 slide presentations that she shared with the kindergarten parents about what they were learning and how they were using the technology to go through with their learning. And it's been awesome because now the kids are familiar with the word GAF, Google Drive, Google Drawings, Google Slides. So I think that's a bare minimum. That's a great place to start to build your foundation.
Right, and there's a question about how do you put your small groups together, and you know, you put your groups probably together in a certain way, and you build up mentors and you build up leadership in your class. How do you set up your students so that they can mentor each other to help each other in this journey?
Well, at the beginning, I start by putting kids together that you know, ones that can work independently with students who need a bit of a push, students who are not so confident in their abilities. So first I start with confidence and ability, and then from there I get into expertise. So what happens is if we're going to be using Google Slides for a particular activity, I'll pair students together or put them into bigger groups based on who has skills in that particular app and who's kind of lacking or needs assistance. So the groups are always changing, and I find that at this point in the school year, I'm kind of letting them choose where they should be, who they should be working with. And I'm finding that it's not causing very many problems because they're engaged, they're interested, a lot of them are empowered, and so they know that when they get together, they're not going to be wasting time, they're focused, they've got to get the job done. And at the end of it, they know that ultimately, whatever it is they produce, they're going to have to sit down with me in conference, and that's where I'm going to get my real evaluation data. It's not going to come from their creation. Their creation will be there to assist them in explaining their thinking to me and how they've applied their skills and those kinds of things. So they take it very seriously, and at first there's a bit of a science to it, but near the end I kind of let them start to choose. And a lot of them will work independently and then go over and seek assistance from particular people. So that also evolves as the year goes on, and it's the whole gradual release of responsibility where at first I'm kind of really on them, and then I slowly allow them to take control of that whole aspect.
Now you use a Chromebook, and I know some people use iPads or other things, but do you find that the fact that they can't keyboard because they're in grade 2, does that hinder them?
At first it does, but I find that as time goes on, it's not really a hindrance anymore. We also use read and write, and so there are some apps that allow them to kind of use their voice to create their text. But I find honestly that they're not really using it as much as maybe some of them should. They're just happy that they're using the technology to benefit their learning. This is my experience. And so at first, the keyboard is a problem. And I could see how it would be in kindergarten, and that's why maybe it's more of a teacher-led type of pedagogy rather than student-led at that point. But in my grade 2 class, 2 years in a row now, I've had students who don't like writing, who then say to me, I don't really like a keyboard, but they learn how to make it work. And they're the ones that usually have more visuals on their slides and things of that nature rather than the text. And that's fair because, like I said, when they meet with me, we talk about it, and so they have that opportunity to present their understanding to me without solely having me rely on text, which I know might not be up their alley. Are there any other questions that I should kind of address at the moment before I dive into this slide?
No.
Okay. So going on with creativity, I have an example here on the right-hand side of our Choose Your Own Adventure learning goal and success criteria, because a lot of what I do in the class is connected to this whole pedagogy piece. So teaching them the different success criteria and how they're going to get there. All that awesome learning connected with GAF has been really transformational, as I've said many times in my classroom. On the left-hand side is an example of one of the students, one of the pages from their book. And you can see here at the top is the text that they read, and then there's a picture. And then at the bottom in the left-hand corner and the right-hand corner, those are the options that the reader can choose as they're going through the text and choosing their own adventure. I got this idea from an awesome Google certified teacher in Toronto, Sylvia Duckworth, and I'm afraid I can't tell you who she got the idea from, but she also got it from someone else. And I read about it through Sylvia, asked her some questions, and this was like a project at the end of last school year where the kids were putting together media expectations, writing expectations, reading expectations, all together in one big project where they could kind of showcase what they've learned all year. You know, the tech literacy, all that awesome stuff, the way that they would use Google Apps for Education, and it was a blast. The kids loved doing it. I couldn't believe the work they created, and it was very creative, more so than I would have ever imagined that these students could have produced without this great software for us to use.
Love that that dog was just peeking out at the bottom. That was a nice touch.
Yeah, like I said, they really got into it. My only thing was get your text in there first. Let's get like the major meat in there, and then you can throw in all the potatoes and the gravy, if you will. So this has been my journey. I've seen how Google Apps has allowed me to build the capacity of my students around collaboration and creativity. And this final slide is a picture of 3 of my students who kind of symbolize what the whole year looked like. I'd be standing anywhere in the room, and they'd be working on a task, and I would look over, and I would see harmony, I would see communication, I would see respectful behavior, and I would see on-task behavior. And it really symbolizes kind of where we started and where we've come. And you know, I thought at the end of last year, how am I going to be able to do this with another class? But it's just going back to basics at the beginning of the year, learning about who your learners are, then introducing them to GAF and to the tools that you might be using to get to GAF, and then explicitly teach them along the way and use that gradual release of responsibility to help them through. And so that's been my journey. And
yeah, and there's been actually a lot of discussion about how to get started in GAF to begin with. I can share a little bit. For me, I find I just dive in, and a good place to start is either documents or even Google Drawing or slides, just to try out the tools, get the students involved. You can do just journals where students are just collaborating. You might put up one question and everybody's just writing down their ideas, and you're just brainstorming on it and getting them used to just typing on the space. And just dive in and try it with a class.
And I
That's a
think the
good
one
point.
thing.
Oh,
Sorry, I
go
think
ahead, Scott.
the one thing for teachers, yourselves, is to try and just use the tools, like commit to, getting away from your desktop software, and the next time you need to create a document or a presentation, start using the tools so you see what is the same, what's different.
And I like to liken the Google Apps platform. People are familiar with Microsoft, so they'll know there's Microsoft Word, there's PowerPoint, Excel. It's pretty much the same suite. Plus, there's Google Drawing, which is just a drawing tool, and Google Forms, which feeds into Google Sheets, and you can do assessments and you can do surveys with students. But don't go into that if you're not familiar with. Start with what you're familiar with. If it's just substituting Google Word with Google Docs, where you see that collaboration point, that's a good starting point to go to.
I remember the first time my students was using Google. Sorry about that. I remember the first time I used it was Google Documents with my students, and I was teaching them how to write a friendly letter. And then after they did so well with that, I remember kind of letting them use Google Drawing, and I said to them, I don't have a lot of expertise, so I'm going to hand it over to you, and I want you to take the time. I'm going to give you 20 minutes, and then at the end of 20 minutes, I want you to come back, and we're going to report to the rest of the class what happened and what we learned. And I think I've shared this with Scott before, and I shared it at the Google Summit in Kitchener last year, was that it was just phenomenal. The things that they actually produced and they were actually able to talk about and show us how they did it. It was amazing. So I gave them 20 minutes to experiment, and then we ended up needing, 30 minutes 2 other days for them to share their work and to talk about their work. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. We're off to the races here. They're going to do whatever they can to get their hands on it and to be able to produce these things. And then it was up to me to take the curriculum and to think about how to make it interesting to them and kind of let them loose. It was really awesome, and it still is awesome. And like I said, it's been transformational. My teaching has changed. Their learning has changed, and I believe it's for the better. And that's what I'm hearing from them and from their parents and from other people who kind of have an opportunity to talk to teachers like us who are using it in the classroom, and particularly with young students. Because if we can get them early, by the time they get to junior, by the time they get to intermediate, they'll be so skilled and open to trying the different things that are out there to help them with their achievement. So if there aren't any more questions, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott and Sandra, for joining me and being part of this experience. It's been that other people have felt that it was beneficial as well.
Now, Roland should put in a shameless plug for his own blog, because that's where I direct a lot of primary teachers, newfluencies.blogspot.ca. And what I love about his blog is that he's got those examples of the anchor charts and the kids with the technology, so you see the whole picture, and it's not just the light show with all the technology, but you see what it takes in primary. So that's where I recommend a lot of my colleagues go.